Hello, friends, and welcome to the Speaking of Equity podcast, where every conversation is a conversation about equity. I am Cornelius Godfrey, your host, and I'm glad to be joined by a good friend and leader in the Troy School District, Ryan Brinks. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I appreciated the time you took to show me around IA East. I enjoyed getting to see all the wonderful things that are happening in your building. Amazing artwork on the walls there.
Yeah, we've got some awesome students here. I feel like we're going to have to do it all over again at the beginning of next year when you can really feel what the start to a normal school year feels like.
Yeah, whatever normal is. And I definitely look forward to that. So we want to give everybody an opportunity, our friends and family in the Troy School District, an opportunity to hear what the thinking is in the world of equity and inclusion, particularly with our leaders. I think it's really important that they have some foundation of understanding when it comes to knowing what the thoughts are of the people who are really making the big decisions. And your building, your program, to me is a really interesting one, really unique one. And I think it's, a really great opportunity for people to hear, how your specific context, which is, significantly different from the other programs in the district, how you, are approaching, thoughts and conversations regarding equity. So again, thanks for taking the time. So as we begin thinking about the world of equity, one question that I would wonder is, in the ways that you position yourself as a leader, and then the thinking that you're doing just as an educator, what are your primary motivators to see the work of equity advanced, and what are the things that have really spurred you to make these thoughts and even the practices that advance equity a priority for you and your work?
Sure. So for me, I think it's about creating a school where all students feel like they belong and that they're valued. I'm sure you can relate to me, and that high school is tough. I think everybody can relate to that, right? And so, I want IA East to be a community so where students can feel safe, where they feel welcome. I know that has been an ongoing conversation with our staff and with our families of how can we continue to make this school be a school for all students, not just safe and welcome, but also where students can feel empowered in a space where they can flourish both academically and social emotionally. So I think when I come to work, that's a driver for me, is in my role as associate principal here. How can I create that environment for all the students at IA East?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I really appreciate how you've, not only highlighted that sense of belonging, but that sense of agency, and as if they have, a say in how their building functions, and being able to give, input into how programs are run, but also what their education looks like. And I think even in my conversations with some students from IA East, I get that. I hear from them that there is a sense that their voice matters. And I wonder for you, how are you positioning yourself to respond to some of the equity challenges that you've been able to identify in your building and program, and can you give us an idea of what those challenges might look like? Not necessarily specific situations, but just what are the things that are really causing you to use the skills and experiences you've developed over the years to respond in ways that increase equity and inclusion at IA East?
Sure. So we've been able to capture student voice in a lot of different ways in the past couple of years. We've obviously had surveys that have gone out to students. We have seminars where students meet in cohorted groups with staff members on a monthly basis. and they share with teachers, and then in turn, those teachers collect that information to share with me and share with our team. We have a group of students that formed across all 3 campuses of the IA, called the Disrupting Racism Student Association. And so they've been able to meet over the past 6 months or so with our administrative team and a group of teachers to kind of share some thoughts and ideas that they have about our program. And so those conversations and hearing from students on an individual basis, working with student clubs, has given me and our staff a lot of insight onto areas that we can continue to improve equity and inclusion here at IA East. One area that we've been talking and working a lot in is in our curriculum. And so how can we continue to create a curriculum that represents all students? When we talk about, our literature curriculum, right? Do we have novels and texts there that they talk about windows and mirrors, that students can see themselves in what they're reading as central characters in these novels? Are we telling stories that they can relate to? But also, are we showing them windows into other people's lives, into other cultures, into other experiences? And then are we being proactive and having conversations in the classroom about that? So it's one thing to read a text that deals with racism or deals with violence or hate, and it's a whole nother thing to engage in a very explicit conversation with your students about those topics in that classroom. And so that's something that our teachers have really been working on and have created those spaces, and they do an amazing job of that. So those are some of the things that we continue to look for opportunities in all subjects for our teachers to have those meaningful conversations, and for us to look at our curriculum so that it represents all of our students.
That's awesome. I really appreciate how you're moving forward in a way that acknowledges that there is no mutual exclusivity as it relates to advancing an equitable curriculum, but also maintaining a level of academic rigor and really pushing for depth of thought and pursuing excellence in the way that curriculum is presented. I think often as educators, people are often positioning these two things as an either or rather than a both and. So I really appreciate hearing that. And I shared before that I had a chance to speak with some IAE students, and one of the great opportunities that was afforded to me was meeting with the BSA, the Black Student Association, and you happen to be there as a supporting staff member, and I really appreciate how you as a leader are affirming the identities of the students that you serve and giving them opportunities to explore how those identities impact the way reality is shaped for them and how they interact with each other, their school community, and the curriculum that's presented there. And I wonder, as you've become a more vocal person in the world of equity, as you've started to do the necessary learning to present these opportunities for equitable learning in your building, how has your own identity played a role and either hindered or helped your advancement toward an understanding of the need for equity in education?
Sure. So many of my identity markers, I would say, represent the privileged culture in our American society, and so I think when you have those privileges, unfortunately, you can choose when and how you want to engage in the work of equity, or when you want to turn it on and turn it off. And when you don't have those markers, I think when you don't come from when you don't have those specific privileges, related to your race and gender and class, and so on. I think you don't. I know you're right. You don't have the opportunity to turn it on and turn it off, right? And so for me, it's trying to remain in that space with students and staff, and know that I have opportunities and abilities to support and advance the work of equity and inclusion for all of our students. And so there's opportunities that I have to help move this work, and I think it's also to be cognizant of how, if I'm not paying attention to my privilege, I can be, it's, I guess a way to say would be, you'd be unengaged, right? Like, so for me, it's important to remind myself of the opportunities I have, and to continue to stay engaged in the work.
Yeah, I 100% appreciate that. That's an awareness that you have, and that you're keeping, some of those things front of mind. I wonder, what are the resources or relationships or maybe individuals out in the world that have helped keep your thinking geared in that direction? Or are there things that possibly you could recommend to others that have been a benefit to you in really positioning yourself to be an active listener, and to take in some of those experiences that are different from yours to inform your own perspective?
Sure. So I've had the opportunity through Troy and through the IA to participate in a lot of different workshops through Oakland schools with Jay Marks and Bill Boyle, really to explore my identity and understand, how that impacts me and impacts others, and to be able to get some more perspective, I think, of the lives of others in our community. It's also, I've been able to do some work in restorative practices, which really helps in terms of having conversations and being able to listen and talk about experiences, and give people space and opportunity to talk about theirs. So those two things have really been beneficial in my growth. And then, I try to apply what I've learned here at IA East, and our staff, many of our staff members have had those same experiences. And so they're able to incorporate restorative practices in the classroom as a means to build community with our students, and acknowledge, I think that our students have a really diverse set of experiences, and that impacts what they bring into the classroom, and kind of creates that, we can really capitalize on our diverse student body here to create an awesome learning experience in our classroom.
I super agree with that, and the usefulness of some of those relationships and opportunities to elevate our own thinking. They're really great in that they not only give us a new perspective as it relates to equity and inclusion and a myriad of other things, but also it affirms our own ability to continue learning and growing. And that way we model, that lifelong learner position to our students, never feeling like there's, an end of the road as it relates to our learning. And I wonder, if you would share with us how you position equity and inclusion for those of our community who may not necessarily meet with the need or understand its relevance. How are you positioning some of these conversations with parents or even students and possibly staff members who don't necessarily think that this is a worthwhile venture, and are looking to have, you inform them, and, what are the ways that you kind of position yourself to be, a listener, as well as an educator for those who are really struggling to see, why this work is important?
Sure. I think I talk a lot about, you know, being able to see things through the lens of maybe the most vulnerable students or the most vulnerable members of our community. And so how does our decision making impact those individuals? And we talk a lot about our community. That's a big piece of the conversation that we have at the IA is how is this impacting our community? And as we're all members of this collective group together and not just individuals. So those conversations are important to have, to frame why we do what we do and why we make decisions. And then I think it's also been really important to have the voices of those that feel like they're on the outside or have experienced, bias and discrimination or racism in our community, to have that voice in that space so that others can hear them and hear their experiences. Those types of opportunities do a lot to help all of us, I think, gain a better understanding of people's experiences and then kind of inform us on what we can do to continue to make IA East more inclusive and make the Troy School District more inclusive.
Yeah, such a great way of affirming, those stories and experiences by, really underlying that sense of community that these individuals who are experiencing some of these incidences of discrimination, they're part of us. So the degree to which they experience it, we may not, feel it firsthand, but that's still an extension of ourselves. And then how does that reframe the conversation so that we're no longer speaking in zero-sum terms of when one group sees, advancement, that must mean some other group is, having something, taken away. So I really appreciate you affirming that sense of community so that there is a shared identity and a shared sense of storytelling, that it's not just their story, it's our collective story. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. One thing that I would ask as we, conclude our conversation is, can you tell our listeners how can they best support you in the work that you're doing? And if there are ways for them to communicate with you and show their support, how can they do that as well?
Sure. So we have active Twitter and Instagram pages for IA East out there. So feel free to follow those to kind of keep in the loop of what's going on. We have a lot of student groups that are engaged in a lot of different ways in our community. A big one is our Educate group. And Educate was created by a couple staff members, Gabby Noss and Alex Benitez, to explore the 50th anniversary around the 1967 Detroit Rebellion, and look at the history and the art that was being presented at that time. And so our students got to go downtown and engage in a lot of the different institutions that had shows and presentations. And that's kind of created an awesome space over the last 4 or 5 years now for our students to talk about issues of equity and justice and explore what that looks like with artists, with activists, with leaders in our community. And so we continue to, reach out for people that want to engage in these conversations with our students and share what they're doing in those areas and continue to encourage our students and provide opportunities where we can have our classroom go out into the real world.
That's fantastic. How proud you must be as a school leader that you've got, innovative teachers and very talented and creative students to really push the envelope about their learning and interacting in the real world and bringing that real world back into the school building. I've also been very privileged to see some really great artwork displayed on the social media pages from IA East. Wonderfully creative students attending there. Beautiful, ways of expressing themselves through visual arts and even in the building, there's a really awesome mural that I was able to see on my visit, and really appreciated the depth of thought in that artwork as well. Thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate the time that you took from your day to chat with us, and I'm really excited about the community hearing your voice and knowing the things that are happening in IA East, and also where the district is moving in ways that are increasing the level of equity and inclusion. Thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Hope to hear from you soon, and we'll see you on the next episode of Speaking of Equity.